Flyers get the extra point in this rare standalone game in the 2021 NHL season. I'm Matt Gajtka with Conrad Waite, the head coach of Duquesne Hockey, and this is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live, also streaming on my Facebook page, also streaming on Twitter too. And as you see there right at the side of the screen, this is interactive. Let us know what you thought about the game, the post-trade deadline period. This is our first show since the trade deadline, and Ron Hextall brought in one of the former Flyers, one of the players that also won a Stanley Cup when Ron Hextall was in Los Angeles in their front office. Jeff Carter makes his Penguins debut, as you probably know if you're watching this, but we want to analyze that. That's one of our headlines for sure, but hey, don't let us limit you. Let your imagination run wild and tell us your takeaways and what you think the Penguins should be aiming for here and what they should be doing lineup-wise. Anything is fair game. Plenty of close calls in this one. Could have easily been more than 1-1 through 65 minutes of hockey. The Flyers win the shootout. But yeah, sure felt like a game that could have gone either way for a long time. But Conrad, like I said, I want to talk about Jeff Carter because the guy wore number 77 in white tonight, for me, was the most intriguing part of the game. And when you look at his results the last couple of years, he's not driving play like he once did. He's also not finishing like he once did. So two big aspects of his game dropped off. But the Penguins throw him right into the fire, didn't they? They don't put him on the wing. I know Malkin's out, so that makes the decision a little bit easier probably for Mike Sullivan and company. But he plays second-line center, plays nearly 20 minutes in his Penguins debut. He's out there in overtime. He's on the second power play unit. Only thing he didn't get was a shootout attempt, honestly. So what are your top-line thoughts on the Penguins' debut of a guy who they used to play against in this gritted-teeth rivalry many, many years ago?
Yeah, I'll have to plead a little bit of ignorance. I haven't caught as many LA Kings games this year as I would like to.
Me neither. That's okay.
I'm still catching up a little bit on kind of Jeff Carter, but my snapshot thoughts were, first of all, yeah, they threw him right into the fire. What I found interesting was they did have him playing center, and Sullivan obviously seems hesitant to really put McCann at center. I think he prefers him at wing. But I noticed in a lot of the D zone that him and McCann made a lot of switches. There were a number of times in which coming out of a cycle, Carter ended up popping out to the wing, and McCann took the low forward position with it. So there was a little bit of an interaction there with two guys that are comfortable with both spots. And actually, on the Flyers' goal, I thought that switch and Carter being new to the system was kind of the impetus to that scoring chance. He blocked the shot. It kind of knocked out of the crease, and you watch him hesitate and almost jump out on the guy, where he could have maybe cut him off and challenged that shot. Backed off of the point, let, I think it was McCann, go off of his hip, scoring opportunity from Voracek, puck in the back of the net. So I did think that it was I wasn't surprised to see them, pull their new shiny toy, a veteran player, and throw him right into it. But you saw some of the growing pains that go along with that in that opportunity, as well as all the positives that we obviously got with him tonight.
The line on Jeff Carter, 24 shifts in his first game with the Penguins, nearly 18 minutes, 2 of those minutes on the power play, actually a minute and a half shorthanded too. So like I said, there were no kid gloves here with Jeff Carter. Took 13 faceoffs, won 9 of them, missed a couple of shots, 2 shots on goal. One of them was blocked. So one of the more active Penguins for sure. He had the opportunity, and that line looked like it had a lot of promise with McCann, like you mentioned, moved to the wing. So we'll see. We still have a ways to go probably before Malkin comes back. But for right now, Jason Zucker is on the left side on that line. And I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. The Penguins didn't have much trouble generating opportunities against the Flyers tonight. Much like the last time the Flyers were in town, the Penguins had, I want to say, nearly double-digit odd-man rushes. I didn't catch a solid number there. I wasn't tallying them up, believe it or not. But they had, on last count through regulation, more than 20 scoring chances. So the opportunities were there for the Pens. And that's where we talk about the other Carter, I suppose, if we want to, Conrad. We can get to that a little bit later. But Carter Hart played out of his mind for the Flyers, including in the shootout, stopping Chris Letang and Sidney Crosby. One other thing on Carter, Jeff Carter, that is, I guess I have to delineate those two. But the thought of him playing center right away, I thought when they brought him in, just the fact that he's older now, he's 36. He's also not playing at the level that he did for much of his prime. I thought we would see him possibly not right away, but maybe alongside Malkin, maybe alongside Crosby, perhaps there could be a way that they could prop him up and give him some opportunities to still use that tremendous shot that he has. But to play him at center, can you explain to the folks who are watching the significance of playing a guy at center as opposed to wing? Because I think those of us who talk about this sport and think about it assume that everyone knows why center is more important than wing in that spot and why it's a more strenuous position, perhaps more to the point here. So what's your cliff notes on that, why center is such a critical position in hockey?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I think one of the big reasons why they targeted Carter, and I think one of the reasons it's a good acquisition, is that flexibility. You know what I mean? It was like not only in position, but up and down the lineup. Obviously, he's centering the second line now, whether it was McCann there and him on the wing. When Malcolm comes back, one of them or someone's going to bump down. And I think it was a good move for them from that perspective. My guess is that outside of the fact that, again, it seems like the Penguins prefer McCann at wing, and so they put Carter in there. I think it could be, something as simple as, they figure that like his comfortability in the system might fit in a little bit better, not knowing as much at center. I mean, he is a pretty good face-off guy. Like I said, one of the things that I noticed was them kind of moving the positions. And so, one of the things with most defensive systems is that where you start on a face-off versus where you end up in the D zone isn't always the same thing. And so starting him at that face-off position where he's comfortable and excels is, a nice easing him into the lineup from that perspective. But the actual, responsibilities in the D zone weren't nearly as consistent from that perspective. You see it a lot with, what we call F1 back, which is your first forward back plays as that low forward. And then it doesn't happen as much in the NHL, but I know at lower levels and at our level, a lot of the times what you'll do is you'll communicate or switch out of that at some point, so that whenever there's an opportunity or that the other team does not have, an advantage, then you go back to the position you're more comfortable with, and that center takes over for whichever winger was F1 back in the zone. So I think that the Penguins probably were, utilizing him more for faceoffs from that perspective. And then in the D zone with limited practice time, knowledge of the systems, just kind of letting him play and letting McCann, who's a very intelligent player as well, read and react off of him.
That's Conrad Waite, head coach of Duquesne Hockey, ACHA Division I. I'm Matt Gajtka, and I am duly outdressed tonight. I wasn't aware it was a formal evening, obviously. I got the backward hat, got the T-shirt on. Hey, you got to class it up somehow, Conrad, so I appreciate that at any rate. This is Pittsburgh Postgame. Some quotes coming in, courtesy of 93.7 The Fan. In fact, on Twitter, Chris Letang saying he thought Carter Hart was outstanding, and he also thought the Penguins didn't play their best for 60 minutes. This is a weird week, Conrad, because we haven't seen a 3-day break for the Penguins, I think, since they had to shut it down for a little bit because other teams had COVID problems going on. So it's been nearly 2 months, in fact, actually more than 2 months since that break. And it looked like it in the first period. The Penguins had, I want to say, 3 shots. They had 16 on goal in the second period, so they got it revved up. But the type of game where both teams didn't look at their best, and the Flyers have been slumping too. So I don't know what I expected, but I certainly thought that the second period, the final 40 minutes of regulation, overtime was scintillating. Plenty of opportunities for both sides to win it, shoot out, whatever. It feels so anticlimactic after 3-on-3, but I suppose you got to end it at some point. You can't play all night. As far as Carter Hart goes, this seems to be quite the conundrum for the Flyers right now. Well, I suppose they've played themselves almost out of a playoff position for sure right now. So maybe they can just afford to roll Carter Hart out there and say, all right, find it before the end of the season. You think that could be an approach here, even though they're not mathematically eliminated? Because if I'm the Flyers, why play Brian Elliott anymore besides just in back-to-back situations? That's the way I feel about it. You got to get Carter Hart right. You got to get him feeling good about himself, don't you?
Yes. I mean, I personally think that Carter Hart, is obviously having a just terrible season. But I think he's probably one of the top goalies in the NHL, or at the very least will be, in the near future. That's where he's going to develop. He is in what you call a slump. And I think the Penguins' first goal is one that I would chalk up to what happens when a goalie mentally just isn't feeling it. You know what I mean? It was like Carter Hart is a very contemporary goalie in terms of like his style and lowering percentage chances, and not always looking like he's making an amazing save because positionally he is so sound, square, and high percentage to the puck. And when you have that kind of loose puck breakdown that happened, and he gets caught half poke checking, half reaching, 5-hole opens up, Crosby steps in on that rebound. Like that's a goalie that's not trusting what his normal position, just kind of protect the net, let that puck sit there, stay out. They're not going to score it on you if you hold your position. And so, it's like you see a player that's struggling and then mentally kind of backing himself into a corner, creating his own mistakes, and it's just snowballing from there. But outside of that, it's like we saw basically the best of Carter Hart tonight. He was on top of, again, it was like he was on top of every shot. He made a number of post-to-post saves. Like he made it look easy, even when he was making, kind of those highlight saves. And I think your number one priority as the Flyers has to be, even if it's not within this season, because you are outside of a playoff spot, it's like starting to get him some confidence back so that next year, this outlier of a season is in his rearview mirror.
We saw why Carter Hart has been so highly regarded and continues to have that potential. Like you said, he reads the play well. He's aggressive when he's feeling good about himself, which he clearly was tonight, outside of the blunder on the Crosby goal. And he has the athleticism to boot, and he has the size. So what else do you really want out of a goalie? He's got it all. And that's why it's so mystifying why he's been so far off his game this year, and why you're seeing, I don't want to call him a washed up Brian Elliott, but the Flyers, who've been desperate for points, have been playing him more than Carter Hart in the last couple of weeks. And the Flyers have been porous defensively, but the Carter Hart issue, I think, has certainly snowballed for them, because when your goalie's not playing well, then you play less confidently in front of him. It's kind of a vicious cycle type of a spot there for Philly. And at this point, they're not going to make the playoffs, barring something crazy in the final 15-odd games. So now it's time to look to the future for a team that thought perhaps that the future was now. Of course, the Penguins, for them, the future and the present are always wrapped up in one here. And here they are close to the top of the East Division. They had a chance to get within 2 points of the Capitals tonight. They just pick up the 1 point for the tie through overtime. So they're at 57 points in third place in the East, 1 behind the Islanders, who lost tonight to the Bruins, and 3 behind the Capitals, who lost tonight to the Sabres. So yeah, real opportunity. And the Penguins just pick up the 1 point, but I suppose it's better than 0. And they were close to getting 2. Evan Rodriguez robbed by Carter Hart. The Pens carried a 1-0 lead into the third. So you could look at it a couple of different ways. Let's go to some comments here. I want to reward the folks who have chipped in. Walt Flanagan says, good evening. The shootout is still stupid. 3 points should be given to a regulation win. 2 points for an overtime win. 1 point for a tie. He wants to play 7 to 10 minutes of 3-on-3 overtime. That's interesting. So he still wants to reinstitute ties. I don't know if I like that necessarily. I would just think that awarding 3 points for a regulation win cures a lot of the ills of the current system. I don't have a problem with the shootout necessarily, because, like I said, you can't play all night, and I don't have an issue with making one team a winner and one team the loser and giving a point to the team that loses in a shootout, because it's not really hockey. But I don't know if I want to go as far as including ties. How many columns do you want in the standings? That's the issue there too. We used to have 4. Remember that? Now we have 3, but it's also doesn't tell the whole story, because overtime wins count the same as regulation. That's the big problem for me. Conrad, how do you feel about the way they hand out points?
No, I completely agree that I think the 3-2-1 system would be a lot better. I also think that with just how we've done things to this point, and generally that the shootout is probably slightly better than a tie, I would stick with a shootout to decide things at the end of it. But I do agree with maybe 8 to 10 minute extension of overtime, just because like every once in a while you get a dud of a 3-on-3. Like even today it wasn't incredible, but you still got as many odd man breaks in that 5 minutes of OT and better chances off of them than you got for probably about 2/3 of the game. It's like that we watched beforehand. So I think extending out overtime a little bit more, doing the 3-2-1 system, and then just finally going to a shootout, which is going to be a lot more special anyway, because you're not going to get as many games that go to a shootout if you not only reward 3 points for regulation win, but extend out overtime for 5 extra minutes. So
I think it's been interesting watching the evolution of 3-on-3. The first couple of years, it was extremely helter-skelter, where teams would just trade 2-on-1s, it seemed, until someone found a way to bury one. Now you're seeing more of a tactical approach that came in maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I want to say, where we saw the majority of teams doing it that way, valuing possession, playing it more like a soccer game where you don't want to necessarily attack the goal if there's a chance you're going to lose the puck. So a lot of regrouping in the neutral zone. I'm not sure that's great for the action, but still, it's 3-on-3. There's going to be plenty of open ice. These players are so quick and so skilled. You give them that much time and space, as the cliche goes, and someone's going to put a puck in the back of the net. Or at the very least, you have a tremendous goaltending display, which we saw part of tonight. And you see some tremendous chances on top of that. So it's not quite as rare to see a shootout as it was the first couple of years for 3-on-3, but we still don't see shootouts as often, which for me is a good thing because that's like a last-ditch type of an effort to break a tie. When you've been coaching, how have you approached situations like that, especially situations 4-on-4? I don't know if you play any 3-on-3 in college, if that ever pops up, but how does that change the way that you have to attack? Because obviously hockey at 5-on-5, it's a pretty structured game, but once you take some players off the ice, that really does change the tactical approach, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we actually have 3-on-3 overtime as well, so it's something that we've had to adapt to. We follow a lot of the NHL through the NCAA rules there. One of the things that I think would make the big difference to this, and you basically pointed out with that, but what we're already talking about is if you extend to 10 minutes, you're going to create a lot more chances through 3-on-3 because, if you looked at the Penguins lineup through their 3-on-3, I think they played, they went Crosby, Gensel, Russ McCann, Carter Zucker, Crosby, Gensel, and right back. So you're only getting your top 6 guys anyway, and playing, maybe 3D throughout that. If you go to 10 minutes, you can't, maybe Letang might make it, but most of these guys aren't be able to go 4 or 5 shifts of 3-on-3 hockey in such a condensed period of time. So when you start going to your third line players or your 4th or 5th defenseman, you're going to get more chances in 3-on-3 because you're going to have more mistakes, which then causes the odd man break in one direction, odd man break in the other direction. And I know at our level, it was like it's whether you kind of save a timeout or change one guy every once in a while. A big part of my strategy with the 3-on-3 is how to maximize your highest talent guys. It's like can I go them every other shift and then have to give them 2 shifts off? It's like do I maybe mix and match their partners a little bit to get a fresh guy with that 2 minutes or minute and a half left with one of our better players on maybe his 3rd shift. And just by extending out the time, you give the coaches less control over the decisions, and in doing that, you immediately have more opportunity for mistakes and offense. It was one of the things to go all the way back. It was like with the Pens having this long break off. Didn't shock me that the first period was as uneventful as it was for both teams because you've had an entire season of game break. When you have that time off, it was like on both sides, both teams had a lot more sticks in the lanes, gave up a lot less opportunities. It was a lot uneventful hockey because it was essentially overcoached.
Yeah, we don't like when you guys get your hands in it too much. The guys behind the bench, we're trying to watch the players on the ice. No offense. I'm sure you understand that too.
Mistakes make for exciting hockey. Like it's a fact. And that's one thing with OT, it was like the more room on the ice creates that opportunity for more mistakes. But if you can lean into those essentially lower end players that are, less perfect, I was like, it's going to be more exciting.
Well, there you go. The case for extended 3-on-3. I think, doesn't the ECHL do a period of 4-on-4 and then 3-on-3? There's something like that. Maybe it's all 3-on-3 now, but it's longer than 5 minutes.
And I know throughout different levels, a lot of times it'll do like a 4-on-4, then a 3-on-3, or like a very low youth level hockey to try to create whatever. They'll do like 5 minutes of 5-on-5, 4 minutes of 4-on-4, 3 minutes of 3-on-3, 2 minutes of 2-on-2, and go all the way down to 1-on-1. I don't think the NFL is going to adopt that anytime soon, but I think extending it out is a good way to go.
Yeah. Bixen Beer is also another commenter that we have with us. Good morning from Germany, he or she says. Good morning. I wish I knew what is the German word for good day. I can't recall it off the top of my head right now. But he or she, like I said, don't know the gender here, but loved Jeff Carter's game. And I will say, Conrad, that I was always a fan of Jeff Carter when he played for the Flyers. I commented on Twitter tonight. He was the one guy on that team that I could perhaps tolerate. Didn't bring a lot of attitude to it. Just played hockey and was really good at it. And we saw him play more on the wing with Los Angeles in his later years, but he was a play-driving center for a long time. And Bixen Beer chimes in and says, "Guten Morgen." That's right. That's how you say good morning over there. I did visit Germany briefly a few years ago. Love to go back. They're very welcoming there, and love to check out Oktoberfest someday. But yeah, back to Jeff Carter and his game. I think he could really give the Penguins a boost, just not just in terms of adrenaline and emotional play, things like that coming over, going from a team in the Kings that are out of it, that wasn't going to compete this year or next year or the year after that. So he's probably feeling pretty good about himself, and I think we're going to see an energetic Jeff Carter down the stretch. But also a player who's not afraid to shoot the puck. As a center, that's kind of rare-ish, I suppose, at this level, a shooting centerman. Typically, those types of players are more set-up guys, but that's not the way he looks at things. And he has some size. He skated really well tonight. So I want to say that I was pretty measured in my take on the Jeff Carter acquisition, especially considering the cap hit. But the Kings kept half the cap hit. So this could be a really shrewd move from Ron Hextall, who probably had some intel knowing Jeff Carter back from his Philly days and his LA days, like I said. And it could be a situation where a lot of teams didn't know that he was even available. So Hextall came with the reputation of being pretty conservative when it comes to trades, but this one struck me as fairly aggressive. How did you feel about just the news of it when it came across?
I thought it was a relatively low risk, potentially high reward decision. It's like, again, we saw it tonight that he slots in as the second line center, and with Malkin and Kapanen injured and even Tanev out, it's like they're missing a lot of guys that they'd like to have in their top nine. And so you bring in someone that has the capability of doing that, even at his age, for at least a short period of time. And so it serves really well initially as kind of a boost to the depth there. And then going into the playoffs, even though, it's kind of a joke of, will the Penguins lineup ever actually be fully healthy, is your ideal spot for Jeff Carter is on the third line, whether it's third line center or third line wing, with the possibility of moving up. But, it was like he just brings a lot more skill, experience, potential face-off guy, all that kind of stuff to your third line, and gives you an opportunity to maybe slot in some of those guys, that we've had as that best third line, whether it's Bluger or Aston Reese or Tanev or any of those guys. It was like, and maybe move them down to make your fourth line even better. Some of the big buzz going into the trade deadline is that the Penguins were looking at all of these, heavy guys, or essentially what you call fourth line players. And I think versus paying a very low price to bring in one of those guys, when we've already proven, whether it's Rodriguez or Zanora or, he's like Schiever, or like literally like any of these guys who I literally only, can pronounce half of the names correctly. It's like they've proven that at the bottom of the lineup, they can be good players. To bring in somebody that fits in that middle six and kind of move up a little bit down, I think it was a great move. I think it was a good decision with the potential to be a great move that we're obviously all excited about after one game at least.
The thing is, when you look at players and their individual output, hockey is not baseball. It's important to remember that, where the players produce individually largely. There's not a lot of effect with your teammates, but you look at Jeff Carter's year-by-year production, and he wasn't quite at a point per game during his best years with the Kings, but really close. And all the way up until 2017-18, then he suffered an ankle tendon injury. And the last 3 seasons, this one counted, he's been at about a half point per game or less. So is it the ankle injury? Is it the fact the Kings just dropped off and several other players are past their prime and they are in a rebuild mode? It's tough to really suss that out until you see a representative sample size here in Pittsburgh. I don't know if 15 games is going to be enough of a sample, but it's what we're going to have as they go into the playoffs. And then you'll have the postseason, and you look at next year as well, because Carter, in his first press conference, what was it, a couple of days ago, mentioned that he seemed like that he had no idea where the rumor or the report was that he might retire at the end of the season came from. He seemed like he was pretty surprised by that line of questioning that he got. And so he could be looking at least playing out his current contract, which runs through the end of next season. So I think I'm going to keep an open mind. I know that much. I don't know about other folks, but a pretty promising debut. I don't know if I want to give him an A, but I'll certainly give him a B or a B plus just from what he showed. And just reading a couple of his post-game quotes, Mike DeFabo, the Post-Gazette, tweets that he said he was worried a little bit too much about the system and thinking about it in the first period, to your point. But after that, he got going north and started to create some chances. So, yeah, B plus debut for me, even A minus if I'm feeling pretty generous about that. I don't know how much more you want to see from a guy who does have a track record, but like I said, last couple of years have been off.
Yeah, and I will say that, again, it was like, would you kind of consider his spot in the lineup? You look at him, it was like, comparing to Zucker, he's half the cost of him. And obviously he's a couple years older, and the whole question of maybe next year and those kind of things, but you have him for maybe a year. And if he retires this offseason, what is it? We actually get money back, which is just an unbelievably luckily or intelligently shrewd move that way. But I mean, is it half the cost that Zucker for a middle six guy? I think it's a win that way. And I think you made a really good point about the role, the responsibilities, and the output from that perspective. And I could talk up and down about that, but it's one of the things that I noticed with the Flyers. One thing that I was surprised at the trade deadline that it seems like NHL teams don't consider as much is the actual roles and responsibilities to how the output results happen. And it's something where I think one of the Flyers' big problems this year, other than the goaltending, is losing Niskanen has affected their defensive core to the point that everybody is in a position that they're not as well suited for. Whether it's Gostisbehere and the contract that he has, but having more of a defensive role, and he's not doing well with that. Whether it's Justin Braun tonight getting burned by Crosby in the first period and Carter in the second period. I mean, it's you wouldn't equate Niskanen as this hugely valuable player, but when you remove someone from that spot and everybody has to move up or slot up one, that the Peter principle comes into effect, and all of a sudden it filters down on everyone else. Ironically, with the trade deadline, what blew me away is how undervalued somebody like Taylor Hall was. When understanding that you're not paying for a top-line guy that was an MVP 3 years ago. You're paying for somebody that is probably, I don't think he would have necessarily fit the Penguins well, but is probably significantly better than Carter, but you're putting him in a middle six winger role. And so to pay for that is a huge win, and kind of blew me away that he was so undervalued from contenders from that perspective. But to bring it back, it was I think Jeff Carter in that role with this team is the perfect spot for him. Even if it doesn't, work out because of chemistry or, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think Taylor Hall is going to end up having an impact on the Stanley Cup playoffs here. And I like the move for Boston for sure. That was the one trade we were all waiting to see happen. In fact, we were waiting to see that happen once he signed the one-year deal in Buffalo. Yep. I think most of us figured, well, he'll play there, hopefully for his sake, play well and create alongside Jack Eichel. As we all know, that didn't really turn out anywhere close to turning out. He ends up getting dealt for something less than what Jeff Carter or Jakub Vrana was worth on the open market, apparently. So really different type of a season for Hall, and what a fall from his MVP year, as you alluded to. But at the same time, if he delivers for Boston, they're not going to care what they got him for, and they'll be talking about that as an all-time steal. And if he doesn't, well, then he'll move on. He'll sign somewhere else, and you can't really take that away from the Bruins for trying. And like you said, I'm not sure he's a great fit with the Penguins, just because I think a guy like that maybe plays better with the puck than without it. And he was going to be alongside either Crosby or Malkin if he came here. And yeah. I'm not sure that works. You know what I mean? There's only one of those little black discs out there that you get to play with.
Yeah. And like I said, it was I was only thinking about it in terms of the cost, and I wouldn't have expected the Penguins to pay it. But just in general, it was the fact that it seems, a lot of people talk about it, but that people couldn't see the perspective of paying whatever to put him on your second or third line versus the expectations of the name or, what he was recently or just his shooting percentage or anything else. It was you see it with the Penguins with guys like Justin Schultz. It was and how he fit in so well in that limited role here. Or you see it, we were talking about the Penguins defense. You see it as we were all worried about Cody Ceci, but when you put him on a third line and manage his minutes and manage responsibilities, he's somebody that's blown me away this season with how good he's been in that position. But if you have to have him as a top four, going against, Flyers top six forwards, all of a sudden he doesn't look like nearly the player he is. And I just think, it's a good thing for fans to keep in mind as you're starting to, pay more and more attention to the game, how much role and responsibility and context matters, as opposed to just the easy stats or, anything else that you can chalk up on the scoreboard.
Yeah, I'm guilty of it too. Just looking at the numbers, looking at production and wondering, why is this guy doing this? Oh, he's really surprising in a positive way. He's surprising in a negative way. So much of it can boil down to role and opportunity. And the Penguins have a good example of that. You mentioned Ceci. He gets to play the third pairing because Brian Dumoulin comes back from injury. And since he's been back, the Penguins have looked like a different team. And I wasn't exactly sure that Dumoulin was going to be able to come back at this level because he had that leg injury a couple of seasons ago, and it didn't appear that he was at full capacity prior to this season and after that injury. So there was plenty to prove here, but he looks great. And he nearly had an odd man rush goal, breakaway goal in this game. So he's definitely keeping up the pace with his legs. And if he's doing that, he's a smart enough player that everything is going to fall into place for him. And as a result, the Penguins have found some great stability on the blue line. Remember earlier in the year, in January, they had everyone hurt on the blue line. And now it's a little bit different. It's the other way around. They're still missing Tanev, who's probably going to miss the rest of the regular season. Also, Malkin, Mike Sullivan said something to the effect of they hope they get him back for the final few games. I think it's a similar deal with Kapanen. Actually, it was Brian Burke who said that on NHL Network the other day, that Malkin is projected to return before the end of the regular season, which is good. But really, bottom line, as long as they get him back for the playoffs, it may take a game or two, but that's the most important thing. And as of right now, they're going to give Jeff Carter a great chance to get his skates under him with the Penguins. So it's been fun to talk about Penguins Flyers with you. I'm just one last check of the comments here. And Conrad, you look at the rest of the regular season. This is the standalone game against the Flyers. It's a makeup game from earlier in the year. But again, we see Buffalo this weekend. But you know what? Buffalo doesn't look quite as easy as of a matchup as they did about a month ago. And even teams like the Rangers and the Devils in this division, it's panning out like I thought it was going to be. I thought this division was at least 6 teams deep coming into the year. Now we've arrived there, even though teams like the Rangers and the Flyers probably aren't going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and a lot of that is, a little bit of matchup like the Devils have kind of given us fits. It'll be interesting to see how Buffalo comes out of the trade deadline, whether or not some of the, again, not that Hall was a problem for them or anything, but sometimes, it's like that can weigh on the team, or, clearing guys out, you bring in some younger guys and they get off to a hot start. So, coming immediately out of those, losses in their lineup, be interesting to see if they kind of crater for a little bit, or if they have a little bit of an adrenaline boost for it. But I think the division is, again, if the Flyers weren't dealing with a sub 880 goalie, means like I think they would be solidly in that top 4 or 5. Rangers and Devils are, is like having a decent season, and Rangers especially are still at least contending for the playoffs. So it was like I don't think it'll be easy for the Penguins, but I think we all kind of looked at this a month and a half ago and hoped the schedule would work out in their favor, having some of the bottom teams that they haven't played yet, and it's worked out so far. So if they can keep it up, even with the injuries in their lineup, I think we can go on a little run here and contend for the top of the division. Just 3 points out of the top of the division. It feels like they're playing the Devils every other day at the end of this year. That's just the way that the schedule has panned out. Excuse me. Allergy season has chimed in here. 3 games in a row against the Devils next week after the 2 against the Sabres. So 5 in a row against teams that definitely aren't making the playoffs. We can say should and could all we want to, but the reality is that, they should win the majority of those. Maybe not all of them, but they should get points out of the vast majority of those, especially since the games against the Devils are at home. And hey, we didn't even talk about it. More fans in the stands, the percentage of capacity increases. I actually felt like the crowd, I don't know about made a difference, but it felt like an actual live sports atmosphere tonight, just watching on TV and listening a bit on the radio. What were your impressions of that? Yeah, I have to imagine for the players, I mean, this is not the bubble was obviously the start of it, but this last year is, the first time these guys haven't played with significant fans in the stands for their pros careers, for most of them probably for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, since midget.
Yeah, exactly. Since they were probably 14 years old, and half of them at 14 years old probably had more than 1,000 fans in the stands still. So that had to be surreal and something to get used to. And I imagine at some point you do get a little bit comfortable with it, but it's got to be nice to just get that little bit of pop and buzz, when things are happening. You saw it with, even just little things like one of the penalty calls, and actually hearing the fans kind of boo. It was like just having that little bit of energy, I think, can make a big difference on both sides, although it helps you, when you're on the home side. So I imagine it's just nice for them to get back to, some level of normalcy, even though I can't imagine, 5,000 feels anything like 15.
Yeah, we're in mid-April. Usually this is playoff time. I wouldn't say it was a playoff atmosphere at PPG Paints Arena, but certainly an improvement over what we've seen for the past year plus. I know the players and coaches certainly felt it. We felt it watching at home. I'm sure you did too. And we have a couple of weeks left before we rev it up for the playoffs. And yeah, we're starting to build that adrenaline up and starting to feel like each game has a little bit more significance. And in a year like this, they all had greater significance than usual. So at least that part of it has been fun. Conrad Waite can be found at the Conrad Waite on Twitter, on Instagram. Also find Duquesne Hockey at DUQ Hockey. They didn't get a chance to play this year, but high quality hockey is not just Division I NCAA. It's also club hockey, ACHA hockey across the country. So if you do get an opportunity next hockey season to check out the Dukes, please do so. They play their home games out at the Alpha Ice Arena. The city game on ice, very entertaining. Very much a part of our local sports scene that doesn't get a lot of publicity. So, Conrad, hope to talk to you again soon before the end of the season. Have a great night, and thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. Thank you for watching. This has been Pittsburgh Postgame. We'll have another Penguins show, I think, on Sunday. We're looking at after the Sabres series. Hunter Hodes of Locked On Penguins is scheduled to join me then. So keep an eye out for that. Like and subscribe, Pittsburgh Sports Live. And we'll talk to you next time on Pittsburgh Postgame.